Calvin Pickard was good in that hockey game. And he didn't have to be exceptional. He didn't have to make any sort of flipping around paddle saves or anything like that, but he was solid. And that's all the Oilers needed.
I think what kind of bothers me one day later is how everyone just kind of looks at it and says, oh, Stuart Skinner was awful. This was the obvious choice. Mm-hmm. No, Skinner was the safe choice. To turn to a 32-year-old journeyman who hasn't been good enough to play in the NHL and hasn't been important enough to an organization to even start AHL playoff games over the last 10 years. This is a guy that's played 5 total playoff games in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
At any level, at the pro ranks. So you throw him into the deep end of the pool in the Stanley Cup playoffs, making his first career playoff start, and at the same time, you're potentially betting another spring of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl magic on Cal Pickard, the guy that is picked up off the scrap heap in free agency, making $762,500. I mean, I wrote it today and I said it and people laughed and it's for effect, but Chris Knobloch, their coach, has balls the size of an Athabasca oil sands dump truck. I mean, that's the truth. To make that call in that situation. And what I like most about it is, yes, it was a bet on Pickard. He also hasn't played since April 18th. So almost a month out from his last game action. If you want to count the 3 shots that he saw in the third period of game 3. I'm sorry. The puck wasn't even in the Oilers' end that game, the third period. So it doesn't matter. So hasn't played. And then this trickle down effect that happens from that. And part of it is you didn't like the play of Skinner and you bet on Pickard. But the other part of it is you're betting on the way your team has defended. And Chris Knobloch said after game 3, actually after last night's game, that he knew that his team had given up the fewest scoring chances against and the fewest high danger chances against of any team still standing in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So number 1 in the NHL in these playoffs in those 2 categories. When you are allowing less than 25 shots every game and they're not great quality from your opposition in this series, that allows you to maybe, do something a little bit different than the norm. But then I mentioned the trickle down effect. And what does that mean? So the Oilers were able to get stops, which means that for the first time since game 1, they were able to play with a lead. And then because they had a lead, then they could dial back Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, who played 6.5 minutes fewer in game 4 than they did in both of the previous 2 games, 2 and 3. So they get a rest. That means, hey, by the way, they're fresh for the final minute of the game if you want to push the pace and go score. And it also allows you to tinker with some other things. Edmonton can experiment then with the defense changes that we were talking about on their pairs. So there's this whole thing. Once you get stops, it makes your life easier. Thank you, Captain Obvious. I understand that that's part of it, but everything else for the Oilers is able to then fall into equilibrium because they're getting stops and because they're defending well.
Vincent Desharnais, 3rd most minutes on the Oilers blue line last night.
That pair was fantastic, by the way, to close out the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be curious to see if they stick with it, but they also controlled 73% of the play, Nurse and Desharnais.
I want to flip it over.
Desharnais is what we'll call it, I guess.
I want to flip it over quickly. Rick Tocchet after the game says, quote, "We need 5 or 6 guys to get going here. I mean, it's the Stanley Cup playoffs. Got some guys. I don't know if they thought it was the playoffs. Who could Rick Tocchet be talking about?
He's legitimately talking about 5 to 7 guys.
Well, I was going to say to ask you it in a way that's maybe not putting...
Cole, Stanley Cup pedigreed. Tons of turnovers this series.
He's been bad.
We've seen Höglander already pulled from the lineup. Mikheyev is where scoring chances go to die. And, what about Elias Pettersson? If you want to drive Rick Tocchet crazy, turn the puck over. Repeated turnovers. And it's not just a turnover because mistakes happen. It's getting rid of the puck flippantly or under pressure. And in a lot of cases for Elias Pettersson, looks like he's scared.
And that was what stood out to me yesterday.
At least 3 plays that I can think of where he had the puck on his stick and had an egregious turnover because he wanted to try and avoid contact.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you fix that in the Stanley Cup playoffs. At some point, teams are just going to be frothing at the mouth to try and crush you.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.